Tycoon Mistress pushes pregnant wife off the balcony. But the revenge will leave you speechless. Another record quarter, he murmured, swirling the aged whiskey in his crystal tumbler. The cool evening breeze carried the scent of success. His success, as he surveyed the city that had once rejected him and now bowed at his feet. Behind him, the sound of gentle humming floated through the open doors. Junho's expression softened imperceptibly as he turned to watch his wife, Hee-soo, arranging fresh peonies in a vase, her 7-month pregnant belly a perfect curve beneath her silk dress. "Are you certain you should be on your feet?" he called, his voice carrying a note of concern that few outside these walls would ever hear. Hee-soo looked up, her eyes crinkling with a smile that still, after 3 years of marriage, made his heart skip. "The baby and I are perfectly fine," she reassured him, one hand resting protectively over her stomach. "She's been kicking all afternoon. I think she'll be a dancer." Junho crossed the spacious living room in long strides, the Italian marble cool beneath his feet. He placed his glass down on the imported mahogany side table and gently placed his hands on Hee-soo's shoulders. "A dancer? With my business acumen and your heart, she'll be running the company before she's 30, he said, placing a kiss on her forehead. Hee-soo laughed, the sound like wind chimes in the cavernous penthouse. "Not everything is about Lee Enterprises, my love. Perhaps she'll want a different path." Junho's phone vibrated in his pocket, the special vibration pattern he had set for certain messages. His jaw tightened imperceptibly. "The board meeting ran late," he said, stepping away. "I need to make a few calls before dinner." "Of course," Hee-soo nodded, returning to her flowers. "I'll have Mrs. Kim set the table for 8. Your mother called. She's bringing those rice cakes you love." Junho nodded, already walking toward his office, fingers flying across his phone screen. "Can't tonight. Family dinner. Tomorrow, same place." The massive oak door closed behind him with a soft click, separating his worlds once again. In the living room, Hee-soo hummed softly to her unborn child, arranging the last peony in the vase. The setting sun caught the diamond on her finger, scattering light across the walls like stars. On the mantel, their wedding photo smiled back at her, the daughter of a seamstress, now the wife of Korea's most powerful businessman. "We're so lucky, little one," she whispered to her belly. "Your father has given us everything." She walked to the window, gazing out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the dusk. In her reflection, she saw only happiness. A woman blessed with love, security, and the family she had always dreamed of. What she couldn't see was the shadow falling across her perfect life, cast by ambitions as tall as the skyscraper she called home. She couldn't see the messages being deleted from her husband's phone, or the cold calculation in the eyes of the woman who had just received them. As night embraced soul, Hee-soo placed both hands on her stomach, feeling her daughter kick in response. "I'll protect you," she promised softly, unaware of how soon that promise would be tested. "No matter what happens, I'll always protect you. Lee Junho," she whispered to herself, testing the feel of his name on her lips, not as his finance director, which she had been for 3 years, but as something more intimate, something permanent. Her phone buzzed with his morning text, "Board presentation at 10. Wear the blue dress." Minji smiled. The blue dress, his favorite. The one she'd worn when he first noticed her as more than just another executive in his company. She ran her fingers along the silk fabric hanging in her closet, remembering how his eyes had followed her that day in the boardroom, how his hand had lingered on hers when passing documents. "As you wish," she typed back, adding a single heart emoji. Professional enough to be explained away if his wife ever saw, intimate enough to remind him of what awaited after working hours. The 50th floor of Lee Enterprises hummed with activity as Minji strode through the glass doors, her stilettos clicking confidently against marble floors. Junior executives parted before her like water, their faces a mixture of fear and admiration. She had cultivated that reaction carefully over the years. "Morning, Director Park," her assistant said, falling into step beside her and handing over a tablet. "Mr. Lee requested these quarterly projections before the meeting." "And the information I asked for?" Minji asked quietly, her eyes fixed forward. On page 3, the assistant whispered. Mrs. Lee's pregnancy checkup schedule, her charity meetings, and the blueprints for the penthouse you requested. Minji nodded, dismissing her with a glance. In her office, glass-walled, with a view second only to Junho's, she studied the information. Every detail of Hisu's life laid bare through bribed assistants and household staff. The naive woman had no idea how vulnerable her perfect world truly was. Playing house with the country bumpkin? Minji muttered, scrolling through photos of Hisu at charity events. Baby shopping, always with that irritating genuine smile. She doesn't even understand what he needs. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called, quickly changing the screen. Junho entered, closing the door behind him. Immediately, the air in the room changed, charged with unspoken wants. The projections, Minji said professionally, handing him the tablet with the appropriate screen showing. Their fingers touched, and neither pulled away. You look beautiful in that dress, he said quietly, his eyes darkening. I can hardly focus on profit margins when you wear it. Minji stepped closer, audacious even here in the glass office where anyone might see. Then perhaps we should discuss the figures somewhere more private. Tonight, he promised. After the executive dinner, she allowed herself a moment of triumph before asking casually, Will Mrs. Lee be joining? I heard she's been quite tired with the pregnancy. Junho's expression clouded. No, Hisu is resting. The doctor advised against evening events. Such a shame, Minji said, not bothering to hide the insincerity. A corporate wife should support her husband at important functions. Shouldn't she? I wonder if she truly understands your world. She watched the seed take root behind his eyes, the doubt she had been planting for months. Hisu has other qualities, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Of course, Minji smiled, moving to straighten his already perfect tie. She's sweet, simple, uncomplicated. She let her hand rest against his chest. But a man like you needs a partner who understands power. Someone who can stand beside you, not behind you. Junho didn't pull away. Minji, I know what you want, she whispered. Because I want the same things. Success, recognition, legacy. We're the same, Junho. That's why this feels inevitable. Through the glass walls, she could see subordinates pretending not to watch their CEO standing too close to his finance director. Let them see, she thought. Let them start getting used to it. Junho finally stepped back, clearing his throat. The board meeting. We should prepare. Of course, Minji nodded professionally. Oh, I heard about the anniversary party next week. 35 is a significant milestone. Hisu has been planning it for months, he said. Minji smiled, her eyes calculating behind the warm expression. It will be perfect, I'm sure. A night to remember. As Junho left her office, Minji turned to the window, gazing out at Seoul spread beneath her. From her pocket, she withdrew a small vial, turning it slowly between her fingers. Yes, she whispered to herself, a night that changes everything. In the center of it all stood Hisu, her ivory maternity gown floating around her like a cloud, her hand protectively cradling her 8-month belly as she greeted guests with the genuine warmth that had become her signature. You've outdone yourself, Junho's mother whispered, appearing beside her daughter-in-law with a glass of champagne that Hisu couldn't share. Though you should be sitting down in your condition. Hisu smiled, her eyes scanning the room for her husband. I wanted everything to be perfect for him. 35 is an important milestone. There are whispers, the older woman said carefully, her voice low enough that only Hisu could hear. About that finance director. Hisu's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. People always whisper about successful men, mother. Junho would never... She stopped as she finally spotted her husband across the room, laughing at something Minji had said. The finance director looked stunning in a crimson dress that clung to every curve, her hand resting casually on Junho's arm in a gesture that seemed too familiar, too comfortable. "Excuse me," Hisu said quietly. "I should check on the birthday cake." She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, accepting congratulations on both the party and her pregnancy, her social smile never revealing the knot forming in her stomach. In the relative quiet of the kitchen, she leaned against the marble counter, taking deep breaths. "Are you all right, Mrs. Lee?" asked Mrs. Kim, their longtime housekeeper, her eyes filled with concern. "Just tired," Hisu assured her. "Could you bring me some water? Something cold." As Mrs. Kim hurried away, Minji appeared in the doorway, her red lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hiding in the kitchen at your own party?" she asked, her voice honey-coated poison. "The guests are asking for you." Hisu straightened, smoothing her dress. "I was checking on the birthday preparations." "How domestic." Minji's eyes flicked dismissively to Hisu's pregnant belly. "Junho was just telling me how disappointed he is that you'll miss the Hong Kong merger trip next month. Such an important moment for the company. The baby is due." Of course, Minji waved her hand. "Babies before business." Though Junho does need someone by his side who understands these crucial moments. "Don't worry. I'll make sure he's well taken care of in Hong Kong." Before Hisu could respond, Mrs. Kim returned with water. Minji plucked the glass from the housekeeper's hand. "Let me," she said with false sweetness. "You should see to the other guests." Mrs. Kim hesitated, looking to Hisu, who nodded reluctantly. As the housekeeper left, Minji held out the water. "For the mother-to-be," she said, watching intently as Hisu took a careful sip. Something flickered in Minji's eyes. Triumph? Anticipation? But it vanished so quickly that Hisu wondered if she'd imagined it. "We should return to the party," Hisu said, suddenly uncomfortable with their isolation. "In a moment," Minji stepped closer. "I wanted to give you some friendly advice, woman to woman." Hisu took another sip of water, finding her throat unexpectedly dry. "Junho needs an equal, not a decorative housewife," Minji continued, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "Do you really think a man like him is satisfied with someone whose greatest achievement is planning parties and producing heirs?" "My relationship with my husband isn't your concern," Hisu replied, her voice stronger than she felt. The room seemed suddenly warm, the edges of her vision blurring slightly. Minji laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "Everything about Junho is my concern. We understand each other in ways you never could." Hisu set down her glass, a wave of dizziness washing over her. "I think you should leave." "Don't worry," Minji said, watching her with cold calculation. "I'll take good care of everything. You're leaving behind." Hisu grasped the counter for support, alarmed by how quickly her strength seemed to be failing. "What did you—" "Let's get some air," Minji suggested, taking her arm in what looked like concern to anyone who might see them. "You look flushed," half guiding, half dragging Hisu through a service passage to avoid the crowded main room. Minji led her toward the private balcony off the master bedroom, away from the party, away from witnesses. The cool night air hit Hisu's face as they stepped outside, 30 stories above Seoul. The dizziness intensified, the world tilting dangerously as she clutched the railing. "Such a tragedy," Minji said softly, coming to stand beside her. "The pressure of being perfect for everyone. The hormones. The isolation." "Junho," Hisu managed to whisper, trying to turn back toward the doors. "We'll be devastated," Minji agreed. "But I'll be there to comfort him, to help him raise your child, to be the partner he truly deserves." Understanding dawned in Hisu's clouding mind. She reached desperately for her phone, but her movements were clumsy, uncoordinated. "No one will question it," Minji continued clinically. "Pregnant women are so emotional, unstable, and the railing is just low enough, don't you think?" "Please," Hisu begged, one hand protectively covering her belly. "My baby will have a better mother," Minji finished. Then, her voice changing completely, she called out loudly, "Hisu, be careful. You're too close to the edge." With shocking strength, Minji's hands planted firmly against Hisu's back, shoving her forward. Hisu's weakened body pitched over the railing, her scream tearing through the night as she plummeted toward the street below. Minji watched for only a second before composing her features into a mask of horror. "Help!" she screamed, running back toward the party. "Someone help! Mrs. Lee has fallen." As chaos erupted in the penthouse, no one noticed the satisfied gleam in Minji's eyes, or the way she slipped the small empty vial back into her clutch. No one except an elderly woman watching from her apartment window in the building across the street, her wizened hands clutching her phone as she captured the truth that no one else would believe. BP dropping, severe trauma to the right side, possible internal bleeding. Called out the lead doctor, his practiced calm belying the gravity of the situation. "And she's approximately 34 weeks pregnant. We need obstetric stat." Behind them, Junho burst through the doors, his face ashen. Tai askew as he ran after the medical team. "Hisu!" he shouted, voice cracking with desperation. "My wife, is she?" A nurse intercepted him, her hands firm but gentle on his shoulders. "Mr. Lee, please wait here. The doctors need to work." "She fell?" he repeated numbly, as if trying to convince himself. Minji said she was dizzy, went for air, and then, as the medical team disappeared through the swinging doors, Junho collapsed into a waiting room chair, burying his face in his hands. Minji appeared at his side, her crimson dress incongruously bright against the sterile hospital walls, her arms sliding around his shoulders. "It's not your fault," she whispered. "No one could have known she was so unstable." Junho looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "Unstable? Hisu has never been unstable." Minji's expression shifted to practiced concern. "She's been under so much pressure lately. The pregnancy, your mother's expectations." She mentioned feeling overwhelmed when we spoke in the kitchen. Before Junho could respond, a surgeon in blood-spattered scrubs approached them. "Mr. Lee, your wife has sustained critical injuries. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding. It's a miracle she survived the impact at all." "And the baby?" Junho asked, his voice barely audible. "We're performing an emergency C-section now. Both mother and child are in extremely critical condition. The next 24 hours will be decisive." As the surgeon returned to the operating room, Junho stared blankly at the wall. "This can't be happening." "I'll stay with you," Minji offered, her hand finding his, squeezing it with calculated pressure. "Whatever you need." Across the city, in a modest apartment overlooking the gleaming Lee Enterprises building, 73-year-old Choi Youngmi sat at her small kitchen table, her gnarled fingers trembling as she replayed the video on her phone. The footage was grainy, taken from a distance, but clear enough to show two women on the penthouse balcony, and one deliberate push. "Murderer," Youngmi whispered, her voice shaking with anger. She dialed the police for the third time, her frustration mounting as she was once again connected to an officer who seemed skeptical of her claims. "Ma'am, as I explained before, the initial reports indicate an accident or possible suicide attempt. Mrs. Lee has been under medical care for pregnancy-related anxiety." "That's a lie," Youngmi protested. "I saw it with my own eyes. That woman, the one in red, she pushed her. I have video. We'll send someone to take your statement tomorrow," the officer said with practiced patience. "In the meantime, please don't share these theories with anyone else. The Lee family has requested privacy during this difficult time." The line went dead, leaving Youngmi staring at her phone in disbelief. Of course, the police wouldn't rush to investigate one of Korea's most powerful families, not based on the word of an elderly widow living on a pension. She looked out her window at the twinkling city lights, determination hardening in her aged eyes. If the authorities wouldn't listen, she would take matters into her own hands. 3 days later, in the hushed intensive care unit, machines beeped steadily around Hisu's still form. Tubes and wires connected her to life support. Bandages covered much of her visible skin, and a neck brace held her head immobile. The doctors had induced a medical coma to help her brain heal from the trauma. In the adjacent neonatal intensive care unit, a tiny baby girl, born nearly 6 weeks premature, fought her own battle in an incubator, her miniature chest rising and falling with the help of a respirator. Junho moved between the two rooms like a ghost, sleep-deprived and shell-shocked. The media frenzy outside the hospital had been relentless. Tycoon's wife in suicide attempt screamed the headlines, each article more sensational than the last. "You need to rest," Minji said, appearing beside him with coffee and concern perfectly arranged on her face. "You can't help either of them if you collapse." Junho took the coffee mechanically. "The doctor said Hisu might be able to hear us. I need to be here when she wakes up." Minji's expression flickered, a momentary calculation. "Of course, but perhaps you should prepare yourself for the possibility that she might not." "Don't," Junho cut her off sharply. "Just don't." A nurse approached them, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Lee, your daughter's vitals have stabilized overnight. Would you like to hold her?" For the first time in days, something like hope crossed Junho's face. He followed the nurse, leaving Minji alone in the corridor, her lips pressed into a thin line of frustration. At the back entrance of the hospital, Youngmi waited patiently, a bouquet of flowers clutched in her weathered hands. When a young nurse emerged for a cigarette break, the elderly woman approached with a warm smile. "Excuse me, dear. My granddaughter just had her baby here, but these old legs can't manage all those corridors. Could you deliver these flowers for me?" To Mrs. Lee Hisu's room. The nurse hesitated. "Mrs. Lee is in the ICU. No flowers allowed due to infection risk." Youngmi's face fell in calculated disappointment. "Oh dear. Is she very bad, then?" The news said she might not survive. The nurse glanced around before leaning closer. "Between us, it's a miracle she's alive at all. Most people wouldn't survive a fall like that. The construction tarp saved her. If it hadn't been installed that morning for facade cleaning, she would have hit concrete. Heaven was watching over her," Youngmi said softly. "Must have been, though she's still not out of danger. The doctors are keeping her in a coma until the brain swelling reduces." Youngmi nodded thoughtfully. "And the baby?" "Tiny but fighting," the nurse said with a small smile. "Like her mother." After the nurse returned inside, Youngmi walked slowly to a nearby park bench. She opened her worn purse and withdrew a small notebook, carefully writing down everything she had learned. "Don't worry, child," she whispered, looking up at the hospital windows. "That woman won't get away with this. Sometimes justice needs a helping hand." As dusk fell over Seoul, Youngmi made her way home, a plan forming in her mind. In her 73 years, she had learned one valuable lesson. Patience was a weapon when wielded correctly. She would wait, gather evidence, and when the time was right, reveal the truth that would bring down the carefully constructed house of lies. Until today. "We're reducing the sedation again," Dr. Kong explained to Junho, who would become a less frequent visitor as the months progressed. "Her brain activity has been showing promising patterns. There's a good chance she may regain consciousness this time." Junho nodded, dark circles beneath his eyes betraying his exhaustion. "And if she wakes up, will she be herself?" The doctor's expression remained carefully neutral. "Brain injuries are unpredictable, Mr. Lee. There may be cognitive impairments, memory loss, personality changes. We won't know until she wakes." From the corner, Minji watched the exchange, her outward concern masking the calculations happening behind her eyes. She had spent these months embedding herself deeper into Junho's life, becoming indispensable at work, a shoulder to cry on, and eventually, warming his bed. The company now saw her as Junho's de facto partner, and rumors of their relationship had become an open secret. Only the child complicated matters. Little Sumin had survived against the odds, growing stronger each day in the NICU until she was finally released to her father's care 2 months ago. Minji had hired the best nanny money could buy, ensuring the infant remained safely distant from her daily life. "I need to get back to the office," Junho said after a moment. "The Shanghai investors won't wait. Call me if there's any change." Minji stepped forward, touching his arm. "I'll stay. You shouldn't be alone when she wakes up." Junho hesitated, then nodded gratefully before leaving. As the door closed behind him, Minji's solicitous expression hardened. She approached Hisu's bed, studying the woman who should have been eliminated from her path months ago. "You just won't die, will you?" she whispered, adjusting Hisu's fore with deliberate slowness. "But perhaps that's better. When you wake broken and useless, Junho will finally see what a burden you truly are." Behind her, a nurse entered quietly. "Ms. Park, the doctor needs to begin the procedure. You'll need to wait outside." Minji turned, her mask of concern sliding seamlessly back into place. "Of course, I'll be in the waiting room." Hours later, as afternoon sunlight slanted through half-closed blinds, Hisu's eyelids fluttered for the first time in 6 months. The movement was slight, a butterfly's wing beat against the hurricane of her trauma, but enough for the monitoring nurse to call for Dr. Kong. Consciousness returned in fragments. First sound, beeping machines and urgent voices. Then sensation, the ache of a body that had forgotten movement. Finally, sight, as her eyes opened to a world that seemed too bright, too sharp, too overwhelming. "Mrs. Lee." Dr. Kong leaned over her, his face swimming in and out of focus. "Can you hear me? Blink if you understand." Hisu blinked, her throat too dry for speech. "You're in Seoul Metropolitan Hospital. You've been in a coma for 6 months following a severe fall. Do you remember anything?" Panic flared as her mind grasped at emptiness where memories should be. Her lips moved silently until a nurse offered ice chips, soothing her parched throat. "My name," she finally whispered, her voice a broken thing. The doctor's expression shifted minutely. "You don't remember your name?" She shook her head slightly, wincing at the pain the movement caused. "Your name is Lee Hisu. You're 32 years old." The words meant nothing to her. No recognition, no sense of self attached to the syllables. "My baby?" she asked suddenly, her hand moving instinctively to her now flat stomach, ancient maternal instinct transcending memory. "Your daughter survived. She's healthy and at home with your husband." Relief flooded through her, though she couldn't picture the child's face or recall carrying her. Something deeper than memory told her this mattered. The baby was important, vital. "Husband?" she echoed. "Lee Junho." Called him. "He's on his way." More names without faces. More puzzle pieces without a picture to guide their assembly. "Rest now," the doctor advised. "Don't force the memories. They may return gradually." After he left, Hisu turned her face toward the window, watching cherry blossom petals dance on the breeze. Something about their gentle falling triggered a flash. Not memory exactly, but sensation. Falling, wind rushing, terror, then nothing. When the door opened again, she turned expectantly, heart racing with the possibility of recognition. Junho entered, his familiar face completely unknown to her. Behind him, Minji hovered, her eyes carefully assessing the situation. "Hisu," Junho said, his voice thick with emotion as he approached the bed. "You're awake. Thank God." He reached for her hand. She let him take it, feeling nothing but the clinical touch of a stranger. "The doctor says you don't remember," he continued, searching her face for any sign of recognition. "Do you know who I am?" She studied him. Handsome, expensive suit, exhaustion etched around his eyes, and felt nothing. No love, no connection, not even dislike. Just emptiness. "I'm sorry," she whispered, watching his face fall. "I don't know you." Minji stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on Junho's shoulder in a gesture that spoke of intimacy, of right. "This must be so frightening for you, Hisu. I'm Park Minji, a friend of the family." Something flickered in Hisu's mind at the woman's voice. Not recognition, but unease. A shadow without form. Her heart monitor beeped slightly faster. "Your daughter is beautiful," Minji continued, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "She has your chin. Junho has been an amazing father while you've been away." Junho pulled out his phone, showing Hisu a photo of a chubby-cheeked infant with curious eyes. "This is Sumin," She's 6 months old now. Hisu stared at the image, tears welling unexpectedly. Unlike with the adults before her, something deep and primal stirred at the sight of the child. "She's mine," she whispered. Not a question, the only certainty in her shattered world. "Yes," Junho confirmed, hope lighting his features at this small connection. "Would you like to see her? I can bring her tomorrow." Before Hisu could respond, Dr. Kong returned. "That's enough for today. Mrs. Lee needs rest. The brain is still healing." As Junho reluctantly prepared to leave, Hisu caught his sleeve. "Wait, what happened to me? How did I fall?" Junho and Minji exchanged a quick glance that Hisu didn't miss. "You were distressed," Junho said carefully. "The pregnancy had been difficult. You went out on the balcony during my birthday party and they think you jumped," Minji supplied when Junho faltered, her voice gentle but her eyes watchful. "But Junho and I always believed it was an accident. You were never the type to—" "I would never," Hisu interrupted, the certainty in her voice surprising even herself. "Not with my baby. Never." After they left, Hisu lay in the gathering darkness, fragments of sensations swirling in her mind. A red dress, dizziness, fear, and underneath it all, a growing certainty that the story she'd been told was wrong. Her body remembered what her mind could not, the feeling of betrayal, of danger. Across the city, in her small apartment, young Mi watched the evening news announce Hisu's awakening, a satisfied smile crossing her weathered face. She picked up her phone and dialed a number. "It's time," she said simply. "She's awake." On the other end, a young journalist with hunger in his voice replied, "I'm ready. This story will change everything." Young Mi nodded to herself, looking at the wall where photographs, notes, and newspaper clippings formed a meticulous map of conspiracy. 5 more steps, encouraged her physical therapist, Ji Woo, a compact woman with gentle hands and a spine of steel. "Your muscles remember, even if your mind doesn't." Sweat beaded on Hisu's forehead as she inched forward, each step a battle against gravity and despair. When she finally reached the end, she collapsed into the waiting wheelchair, lungs heaving. "Excellent progress," Ji-woo said, making notes on her tablet. "You're advancing much faster than expected." Hisu wiped her face with a towel, studying her trembling hands. "Not fast enough. Patience," Ji-woo reminded her. "Your husband mentioned bringing your daughter again today. That should be motivation." At the mention of Sumin, Hisu's expression softened. The infant had become her anchor in a sea of uncertainty. Though she couldn't remember carrying or birthing her daughter, their connection was visceral and immediate, the only relationship that felt real in her fragmented world. "I want to hold her myself this time," Hisu said, "without help." After returning to her private room, Hisu painfully changed from her sweat-dampened therapy clothes into a simple cotton dress that someone, presumably her former self, had packed in the hospital bag. She still struggled with buttons and zippers, but today's small victory in physical therapy gave her confidence. She was brushing her hair when a knock came at the door. "Come in," she called, expecting Junho with Sumin. Instead, an elderly woman entered, carrying a modest bouquet of wildflowers. Hisu stared at the stranger, searching for any spark of recognition. "You don't remember me," the woman said, her tone matter-of-fact rather than disappointed. "I'm Choi Young-mi. We've never actually met, but I've been watching over you." Hisu set down her hairbrush, caution creeping into her posture. "Watching over me?" Young-mi placed the flowers on the bedside table before sitting in the visitor's chair. "I live in the apartment building across from yours. I saw what happened the night you fell." Hisu's heart rate quickened. "You saw me fall?" "I saw you pushed," Young-mi corrected, her voice dropping to a near whisper. She reached into her bag and withdrew a tablet. "And I recorded it." Hisu's hands trembled as she took the device. On the screen was a grainy video, clearly taken from a distance but showing 2 figures on a balcony, one in white, one in red. She pressed play, watching with mounting horror as the scene unfolded. culminating in the unmistakable forward thrust from the woman in red. "That's me?" she asked, pointing to the white-clad figure. Young Mi nodded grimly. "And Park Minji pushing you over the edge." The tablet slipped from Hisu's suddenly numb fingers. Fragmented sensations she'd been experiencing since waking. Vertigo, terror, betrayal, suddenly had context. Though her explicit memories remained elusive, her body remembered the violence done to it. "She tried to kill me?" Hisu whispered, the truth settling into her bones. "Why?" "Power, position, your husband," Young Mi said simply. "The oldest motivations in the world. Have you shown this to the police?" Young Mi's leathery face creased with bitter amusement. "3 times. They call it inconclusive, and remind me that Minji was the first to call for help. Besides, the Lee family has enough influence to make uncomfortable truths disappear." Hisu leaned back, her mind racing. "Junho, does he know? What do you think?" Young Mi asked gently. Before Hisu could respond, the door opened again. Junho entered carrying Sumin, Minji close behind him like a shadow. The intimate familiarity between them was impossible to miss. The way she adjusted his collar, how she reached for the baby as if she had every right to. Hisu's blood turned to ice. "You have a visitor," Junho observed, nodding toward Young Mi with mild curiosity. "My new friend," Hisu said, forcing a smile. "She brings me flowers from her garden." Young Mi stood, bowing slightly to Junho. "I was just leaving. Wonderful to see the baby looking so healthy." She gave Hisu's hand a quick squeeze. "Remember what I said about taking small steps. Recovery is a journey, not a destination." After she departed, Minji approached the flowers, touching a petal with feigned interest. "How rustic. I've arranged for fresh orchids to be delivered daily. Much more appropriate for someone of your status." Hisu said nothing, watching Minji through new eyes, seeing the predatory calculation beneath her polished exterior. How had she missed it before? Junho placed Sumin in Hisu's arms, and the infant immediately settled against her chest, tiny fingers clutching at her dress. The simple, primal connection fortified Hisu. "The doctors say you might be ready to come home next week," Junho said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I've had the penthouse renovated to accommodate your rehabilitation needs. Ground floor bedroom, wider doorways for the wheelchair. We've made sure everything will be perfect," Minji interjected. "I personally supervised the contractors." "We?" Hisu questioned, looking directly at Junho. "Does Minji live with you now?" The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. "It's not what you think," Junho began awkwardly. "Minji has been essential while you were absent. She helped with Sumin in the beginning, with the company, with everything." "I understand," Hisu said quietly, stroking Sumin's soft hair. 6 months is a long time." Minji's smile was triumphant. "I'm just grateful I could be there when Junho needed someone. When you're fully recovered, things can return to normal." The lie hung in the air between them. There would be no return to normal. Not when normal had been destroyed by the woman now wearing Hisu's life like a stolen garment. "Of course," Hisu agreed mildly. "I'm looking forward to coming home." Later, after they had gone, Junho with a distracted kiss to her forehead, Minji with a warning glance that went unnoticed by him. Hisu struggled to her feet and made her way to the window. Night was falling over Seoul, lights blinking on across the cityscape. Somewhere in that glittering expanse was the penthouse she apparently once called home, now inhabited by the woman who had tried to kill her. Her phone, a new one provided by Junho with only his number and Minji's programmed into it, chimed with a message notification. From an unknown number. "A wolf doesn't change her nature just because she failed to kill once. Be careful." Hisu clutched the phone to her chest, a plan forming in her mind. Memory or no memory, she was not going to be a victim twice. Minji had taken advantage of her absence to steal her life, believing Hisu would return broken and diminished if she returned at all. That would be Minji's fatal mistake. 3 days later, reporter Kim Jae-hwan hunched over his laptop in a small coffee shop, transferring Youngmi's video to a secure server. 28. He was hungry for the story that would elevate him from the society pages to serious journalism. The attempted murder of a chaeble's wife by his ambitious colleague, with potential complicity from the husband himself, could be that story. You understand the risks? Youngmi asked, sipping her tea across from him. He nodded. Lee Enterprises owns half the media outlets in Seoul. If they discover I'm investigating this, my career is over. Not just your career, Youngmi warned. These people are dangerous. Minji pushed a pregnant woman off a high-rise without hesitation. What do you think she'd do to a nosy reporter? Which is why we need irrefutable evidence before publishing anything, Jae-hwan replied. Your video is compelling but not conclusive. We need medical records showing drugs in her system, witnesses from the party, financial transactions, anything that builds the case beyond reasonable doubt. Youngmi slid a thumb drive across the table. Hospital security camera footage from the night of the accident. My nephew works in IT there. Notice how Minji keeps everyone away from Hee-soo in the kitchen? And watch her hands when she gives her water. Jae-hwan pocketed the drive, his pulse quickening. I'll analyze it tonight. What about Hee-soo herself? Will she help us? She's playing a dangerous game, Youngmi said, worry creasing her brow. Pretending to be weaker than she is, keeping her suspicions hidden. She's going back to that penthouse, back to the Viper's Nest, in 3 days. That's incredibly risky, Jae-hwan protested. If Minji suspects she knows anything, Hee-soo believes she has no choice, Youngmi interrupted. She won't leave her daughter in that house without protection. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. And she's remembering things. Not whole memories yet, but fragments. Enough to know she can't trust her husband either. Jae-hwan's eyes widened. You think he was involved in the attempt on her life? Youngmi's weathered face hardened. I think a man who moves his mistress into his home while his wife lies comatose is capable of anything. And Hee-soo's fortune, inherited from her grandfather's shipping empire, would transfer to him as Sumin's guardian if Hee-soo were to have another accident. Outside the cafe window, late afternoon sunlight glinted off the steel and glass towers of Seoul's business district. Among them, the Lee Enterprises headquarters rose like a monolith, its shadow stretching across the city as day surrendered to evening. Inside that tower, Minji stood at Junho's office window, gazing at the same skyline. Her reflection superimposed over the city she intended to rule alongside him. The home healthcare arrangements are finalized, she reported, turning to where Junho sat reviewing contracts. Hee-soo will have around-the-clock care until she's independent again, if she ever is. Junho didn't look up. Good. Make sure they understand discretion is paramount. The shareholders are finally settling after the accident. We don't need rumors about Hee-soo's mental state complicating matters. Minji approached his desk, perching on the edge. Have you considered what I said? About filing for divorce once she's stable? It would be the kindest option for everyone. She barely knows you now. Junho finally looked up, conflict evident in his eyes. She's the mother of my child, Minji. And I'm the woman who saved your company while she slept. Minji countered, her hand covering his. The woman who's been warming your bed for months. How long do you expect me to share you? It's complicated, he hedged. Minji's fingers tightened on his. It doesn't have to be. Hee-soo could have another accident. A more permanent one. The silence that followed her words stretched between them like a chasm. When Junho finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. I think you should focus on the Hong Kong merger for now. We can discuss other matters after Hee-soo is settled at home. Minji's smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course, whatever you think is best. As she left his office, her mind churned with contingency plans. She hadn't come this far, sacrificed this much, to be displaced by a damaged woman with no memory and half a functioning body. If Junho wouldn't choose, she would eliminate the choice. Minji's touch was everywhere. In the sterile modernist sculptures that had replaced Hee-soo's beloved ceramics, in the cold gray palette that had overtaken the warm tones she must once have chosen, in the subtle repositioning of furniture that left convenient wheelchair paths but also isolated Hee-soo from the home's central spaces. "More tea, Mrs. Lee?" asked Nurse Kong, a stone-faced woman hired by Minji who watched Hee-soo with the vigilance of a prison guard rather than the compassion of a caregiver. "No, thank you," Hee-soo replied, maintaining the docile, grateful demeanor she had cultivated since returning. "Has my husband called? Mr. Lee and Miss Park are in meetings all day. They asked not to be disturbed." The subtle emphasis on Minji's name delivered the intended message. "You are an afterthought in their world." Hee-soo nodded placidly. "I understand. And Soo-min, the nanny has taken her to the pediatrician. Routine checkup. Without asking permission. Something that happened with increasing frequency." Nurse Kong administered Hee-soo's midday medications, watching hawk-like as she swallowed the pills. "All of them, please," she insisted when Hee-soo hesitated over the small blue tablet that always left her disoriented and drowsy. "Of course," Hee-soo murmured, pretending to swallow while concealing the pill under her tongue, a trick she had perfected over the past week. Once the nurse departed, she discreetly removed it, adding it to the collection hidden in a hollowed-out book on her nightstand. The moment the nurse's footsteps faded, Hee-soo pushed herself up from the wheelchair. "Her legs," he said, an edge creeping into his voice. "You were obsessed with some financial irregularities you thought you'd found, making wild accusations." He stopped abruptly, as if catching himself revealing too much. Hee-soo sat up straighter, pulse quickening. "What accusations?" Junho stood, retreating toward the door. "It doesn't matter now. The doctors said not to overwhelm you with the past. Focus on getting stronger." "Junho," she called as he reached for the doorknob. "Do you believe I tried to kill myself?" His hand froze on the door. After a long moment, without turning to face her, he answered, "I believe you weren't yourself that night." After he left, Hee-soo sat motionless in the darkened room, piecing together the new information. She hadn't been a passive victim before her fall. She had been investigating something, making accusations, becoming a threat. Moving carefully to her window, she gazed across the city toward where Young Mi's apartment building stood. Somewhere in that direction, a team was working to uncover the truth she had apparently discovered once before. A truth someone had tried to bury along with her. Her phone vibrated with an incoming message from Jae Hwan. Found connection between Apex Solutions and offshore accounts in Minji's name. 30 billion Korean wons transferred in last 6 months. Junho's signature on all authorizations. They're in it together. The final piece clicked into place, cold clarity washing over her. Junho hadn't just moved on with Minji during Hee-soo's coma. Their relationship, their conspiracy, had begun long before her fall. Perhaps her pregnancy had been the complication, the inconvenient obstacle to their plans. Perhaps she had discovered their embezzlement scheme and confronted them. And perhaps Junho had known exactly what would happen when he left his pregnant wife alone with Minji on that balcony. Hee-soo closed her eyes, squeezing back tears. The truth was ugly, but it was grounding. She knew now what she needed to do, not just for justice, but for survival. For Soo-min, across the penthouse, in the master bedroom that had once been hers, Junho poured himself another whiskey, staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. "Is she asleep?" Minji asked, appearing behind him in a silk robe. "She's remembering things," he said, his voice tight with worry, asking questions about what happened before. Minji's arms slid around his waist, her chin resting on his shoulder as she met his eyes in the mirror. "Then we're running out of time. The board dinner tomorrow provides the perfect opportunity." "For what?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Minji's lips curved into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "To solve our problem permanently. After all, what could be more tragic than a recovering patient, still disoriented from brain injury, wandering onto a balcony in the dark?" Junho didn't respond, draining his whiskey in a single swallow as Minji's reflection continued to smile behind him, her eyes cold and determined in the harsh bathroom light. The medication she had pretended to take left her mind clear and focused. Her body, strengthened by weeks of secret exercises, felt taut with anticipation. Tonight would end where it all began, on that balcony in darkness with truth finally exposed to light. She had spent the afternoon with Su Min, memorizing every detail of her daughter's face. The shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile, the weight of her tiny body against Hisu's chest. If things went wrong tonight, she wanted those memories intact, precious fragments to carry into whatever darkness awaited. "Mrs. Lee, you should be resting." Nurse Kong approached with disapproval etched into her features. Ms. Park was quite clear about tonight's arrangements. "I'm just watching the preparations," Hisu replied, affecting the docile tone that had become her shield. "It's been so long since I've seen the apartment full of life." The nurse's expression softened fractionally. 10 minutes, then back to bed. The excitement isn't good for your recovery." As the nurse walked away, Hisu's phone vibrated in the pocket of her robe. A message from Young Mi. "Jae-hwan in position. Security feed compromised. Evidence secured. Be careful." 15 minutes later, the doorbell chimed with the first arrivals. From her partially open bedroom door, Hisu watched as Junho and Minji greeted their guests, board members in expensive suits, their wives draped in designer fashion, all exclaiming over the extravagant flower arrangements and the panoramic view of the storm-swept city. Minji moved among them with practiced grace, her red dress a deliberate echo of the one Hisu had worn the night of her fall. The symbolism wasn't lost on Hisu. It was both taunt and declaration of victory, Minji boldly stepping into the role she had violently claimed. Junho played his part as charming host, but Hisu noticed the strain around his eyes, the way his hand trembled slightly as he poured drinks. Whatever was planned for tonight weighed on him, though not heavily enough to stop it. When the apartment had filled with guests, Hisu slipped into the bathroom and changed into the outfit Young Mi had smuggled to her. Black pants and a simple blouse that allowed freedom of movement. She pinned her hair back, studying her reflection. The woman who gazed back looked stronger than she felt, determination burning through the fear in her eyes. Her phone vibrated again. Now, kitchen entrance. Moving silently, Hisu eased out of her bedroom and through the service corridor that led to the kitchen. The staff was busy preparing dinner, attention focused on the elaborate meal. No one noticed as she slipped through to the utility entrance where Jae-hwan waited, face tense with concentration. 3 minutes until the security loop begins, he whispered, checking his watch. When it does, we'll have exactly 22 minutes before the system resets. Enough time? Hisu asked. If everything goes according to plan. He handed her a small recording device. This is already active. Keep it in your pocket. They moved together through the service areas toward the study, Junho's private sanctuary that Minji had transformed into her own command center. Using an electronic key card that bypassed the security system, Jae-hwan opened the door. I'll get the files from the safe, he said. Keep watch. Hisu positioned herself by the door, listening to the dinner party beyond. She could hear Minji's laughter, the clink of crystal glasses, the murmur of business conversation. Jae-hwan worked quickly at the safe hidden behind a painting, his fingers dancing across the electronic keypad. Got it, he whispered triumphantly, extracting a hard drive and several folders. Financial records, offshore account details, shipping manifests with diverted cargo. He photographed each document with practiced efficiency. A sudden silence from the dining room made Hisu's heart race. Something's happening, she warned. Jae-hwan quickly returned the documents, leaving the safe exactly as they'd found it. We need to move. The balcony scenario will start soon. They had just slipped back into the service corridor when Hisu heard Minji's voice above the dinner conversation. I'd like to propose a toast to new beginnings, to the future of Lee Enterprises, and to the announcement Junho and I have been waiting to share. Hisu froze, listening as Minji continued. While these past months have been challenging, they've brought clarity. Tonight, we're announcing our engagement, and with it, the full merger of Park Holdings with Lee Enterprises. Gasps and applause followed, congratulatory exclamations filling the air as Hisu's world tilted on its axis. Not just business partners they were planning to marry. The The final erasure of her existence was being orchestrated before an audience. "Hee-soo," Jae-hwan urged, tugging at her arm. "We need to stay on schedule." She nodded mechanically, following him toward the balcony doors at the far end of the apartment. According to Youngmi's intelligence, Minji planned to drug Hee-soo's evening medication more heavily than usual, then stage another accident during the confusion of the dinner party. A relapse, a moment of disorientation, a tragic fall. They reached the shadows near the balcony just as Minji detached herself from the group, moving toward Hee-soo's bedroom with purposeful steps. Junho watched her go, conflict visible on his face for just a moment before he turned back to his guests with a brittle smile. "She's going to find your room empty," Jae-hwan whispered. "We have minutes, not hours. Are you ready?" Before Hee-soo could answer, a child's cry pierced the apartment. Soo-min, awakened by the storm or the noise of the party. The nanny hurried from the nursery, bouncing the fussing infant as she approached Junho. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lee. She won't settle. I think she might be getting sick." Junho looked momentarily flustered, taking the baby awkwardly. "I'll handle it. Just give us a moment." He carried Soo-min toward the quieter corner of the living room, away from the guests. Something in the tenderness with which he held her made Hee-soo's heart contract painfully. Whatever his crimes, his love for their daughter seemed genuine. Minji returned from the bedroom, her face a mask of controlled alarm. She whispered urgently to Junho, who passed Soo-min back to the nanny with instructions to take her downstairs to the car with the driver. Hee-soo watched, horrified, as her daughter was carried away, a contingency she hadn't anticipated. "They're removing witnesses," Jae-hwan murmured. "It's happening now." Minji began quietly directing staff to search the apartment while maintaining a smile for the guests. Junho excused himself, heading directly toward the balcony, toward Hee-soo's hiding place. "Time to confront him," Jae-hwan said. "I'll stay hidden until needed. Remember, keep him talking. We need his confession." Heart thundering in her chest, Hee-soo stepped out from the shadows just as Junho reached the balcony doors. His face went slack with shock. "Looking for me?" she asked quietly. Junho recovered quickly, taking her arm and guiding her through the balcony doors, away from potential witnesses. Rain immediately soaked them both as he closed the doors behind them. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "You're supposed to be resting." "Resting? Or dying?" Hee-soo asked, the recording device heavy in her pocket. "Which did you and Minji plan for tonight?" Thunder cracked above them, illuminating Junho's face in stark relief, guilt and fear warring across his features. "You don't understand what's happening," he said, rain plastering his hair to his forehead. "Go back to your room. I'll handle Minji. Like you handled her the night I fell?" The words emerged as a challenge, sharp-edged with the anger she'd suppressed for months. "I remember more than you think, Junho. I remember finding the financial discrepancies. I remember threatening to go to the board." Junho's expression hardened. "You were emotional, irrational. The pregnancy hormones? Don't you dare." Hee-soo cut him off, stepping closer despite the danger. "Don't diminish me with medical excuses. I discovered that you and Minji were embezzling millions, diverting company assets, setting up offshore accounts." Behind Junho, through the glass doors, Hee-soo saw Minji notice their presence on the balcony. Her face registered first surprise, then calculation as she began moving toward them. "I was protecting our future," Junho insisted, rain streaming down his face like tears. "The company was failing. Minji had connections, solutions, criminal solutions," Hee-soo pressed. "And when I threatened to expose you both, what then? Did you plan my accident together? Or did Minji take the initiative?" The balcony door slid open, Minji stepping through with the grace of a predator. "She remembers," she said to Junho, not bothering with pretense. "I told you the medication wasn't strong enough." "Minji, don't," Junho began, but she cut him off with a dismissive gesture. "It's too late for second thoughts," she said coldly. "We've come too far." Minji turned to Hee-soo, the rain having no effect on her perfect composure. You were always the problem, Hisu. Too principled, too concerned with ethics when business requires flexibility. You mean fraud, Hisu replied. Embezzlement, criminal conspiracy. Minji shrugged elegantly. Labels created by people who don't understand real business. Your family's company was dying. Junho lacked the vision to save it. I provided solutions. By stealing from it? By reallocating resources to more profitable ventures, Minji corrected. Junho understood the necessity, even if he lacked the courage to act without my guidance. Junho stood between them, rain dripping from his chin. Hisu, please go back inside. We can discuss this privately. There's nothing to discuss, Minji said sharply. She knows too much. Again. She moved closer to the balcony rail, her red dress dark with rain. History repeats itself, doesn't it? A distressed woman, a rainy night, a tragic accident. The realization of Minji's intent crystallized in Hisu's mind. You pushed me, she said, the memory suddenly clear. I confronted you both at the party, threatened to go to the authorities, and you followed me out here. Junho left and you... I did what needed to be done, Minji finished. What Junho couldn't bring himself to do, despite knowing it was necessary. Junho's face contorted with anguish. I never wanted you hurt, Hisu. I just needed time to fix the financial situation. Minji promised she would just talk to you, make you understand, and you believed her? Hisu asked incredulously. Or did you simply leave the balcony knowing exactly what would happen, giving yourself plausible deniability? The balcony door slid open again, and several board members stepped out, curious about the drama unfolding in the rain. Behind them, Jae-hwan positioned himself with his phone recording. What's going on here? Asked Chairman Kim, the most senior board member. Minji's demeanor shifted instantly, her voice taking on a concerned tone. Mrs. Lee is having one of her episodes. The doctors warned us about delusional behavior. Junho, perhaps we should call her nurse. No episodes, Hisu said firmly, addressing the board members directly. I'm exposing a criminal conspiracy within the company. Minji Park and my husband have been embezzling millions, establishing shell corporations, and diverting corporate assets to offshore accounts. Murmurs of shock rippled through the growing audience. Minji's smile became strained. She's confused from her medications, Minji insisted. Her brain injury causes paranoid fantasies. We have proof. Jae-hwan stepped forward, holding up his phone. Financial records, account numbers, forged signatures, and now a recorded confession. He played the recording they just captured, Minji's voice clear above the rain. I did what needed to be done, what Junho couldn't bring himself to do, despite knowing it was necessary. Minji's composure cracked, her eyes darting between the board members and the balcony rail, calculating odds, assessing escape routes. In that moment, with lightning illuminating her face, Hisu recognized the ruthless predator who had pushed her from this very spot months ago. It was business, Minji said finally, abandoning pretense. The company was failing. Traditional methods weren't working. I made the hard choices everyone else was too weak to make. Including attempted murder? Chairman Kim asked, appalled. Accidents happen in business, Minji replied coldly. Then, with the speed of desperation, she lunged toward Hisu. Junho moved faster, placing himself between the women. No more, he said firmly, gripping Minji's arms. It's over. Security guards summoned by Jae-hwan pushed through the crowd, taking control of the situation. As they led Minji away, her composure finally shattered. You're nothing without me, she screamed at Junho. Your precious family company would have collapsed years ago if not for me. You agreed to everything. Everything. In the silence that followed her removal, Junho stood facing Hisu, rain streaming down both their faces. The board members and guests retreated inside, giving them privacy while remaining visible through the glass, witnesses to whatever would unfold. I never wanted you hurt, Junho repeated, his voice breaking. When Minji told me what happened, that you'd fallen, I was devastated. But by then, I was already implicated in the financial crimes. She convinced me our only option was to move forward with the plan. And our daughter? Hisu asked. Was she part of this plan? Junho's eyes filled with tears that mingled with the rain. Sumin is the only pure thing in all of this. I love her more than anything, even more than the company, more than my freedom. I'll accept whatever punishment comes, but please, don't take her from me completely. Hisu studied the broken man before her. Not the powerful executive she had married, but a weak soul who had made catastrophic choices. She felt no triumph in his downfall, only a profound sadness for what might have been. I'm not like you, she said finally. I won't use our child as a weapon, but justice has to be served, Junho. For what was done to me, to the company, to all the people whose livelihoods were jeopardized by your greed. He nodded, resignation settling over his features. I understand. As they stood in the rain, the city lights blurred below them. Hisu felt the weight of the past year lifting. Not in a moment of cathartic release, but in the quiet acknowledgement that survival itself was victory. She had been broken, forgotten, nearly destroyed, but she had risen to reclaim her life, her child, and her truth. Inside, young Mi waited with Sumin in her arms, the child miraculously calm despite the chaos around her. As Hisu stepped through the balcony doors, leaving Junho to face the board members alone, her daughter reached for her with perfect trust, taking Sumin into her arms, feeling the solid warmth of the life she had created. Hisu finally allowed herself to weep, not from sadness or fear, but from the profound recognition that her journey back from darkness was complete. We're going home, she whispered to her daughter as young Mi wrapped a protective arm around them both. The real home, where your grandmother's garden waits for us, where we can begin again. She sat on the wooden porch, watching Sumin toddle unsteadily across the grass, chasing a butterfly with determined concentration. At 14 months, her daughter was a whirlwind of curiosity and joy, seemingly untouched by the turmoil that had surrounded her earliest days. More tea. Young Mi appeared with a steaming pot, her weekend visit a welcome respite from the corporate responsibilities that had consumed her weekdays. Please, Hisu nodded, holding out her cup. Any news from Seoul? Young Mi's expression tightened slightly as she poured. The sentencing is scheduled for next week. The prosecutor believes Minji will get 12 to 15 years. Junho's cooperation reduced his likely sentence to 5 to 7. Hisu absorbed this information silently, watching as Sumin abandoned the butterfly chase to examine a particularly fascinating pebble. And the company? Stabilizing, Young Mi reported. The board appointed Director Kong as interim CEO until you decide. She hesitated. Until you make your decision. The unspoken question hung between them. In the aftermath of the scandal, the board had made it clear that the Lee family legacy, specifically Hisu's inherited controlling interest, remained the cornerstone of the company's future. They wanted her back, needed her leadership to restore public confidence. But Hisu had discovered something unexpected in her months of recovery here. Peace existed beyond the boundaries of obligation and expectation. I keep thinking about my grandmother, she said finally. How she walked away from her family's shipping empire to marry my grandfather and live here. Everyone thought she was throwing her life away. Young Mi smiled. Instead, she built something different but equally meaningful. Yes. Hisu sipped her tea, savoring its delicate flavor. I've been reading her journals. Did you know she never regretted her choice? Not once in 50 years. Before Young Mi could respond, the sound of tires on gravel announced an arrival. Sumin looked up curiously, then returned to her serious examination of garden treasures. Are you expecting someone? Young Mi asked, rising. Jaehwan mentioned he might stop by with some final documents, Hisu replied, though the expensive black sedan pulling into the driveway wasn't one she recognized. The car door opened, and for a moment, Hisu's heart stuttered. Junho stepped out, looking diminished in casual clothes without his usual executive armor. Behind him emerged an older woman, his mother, whom Hisu had met only twice during their marriage. Youngmi moved protectively to Hisu's side. Should I ask them to leave? Hisu hesitated, then shook her head. No, I agreed to this visit. Junho's mother wanted to see Sumin before everything changes. She stood as they approached, Junho's steps hesitant, his mother's more determined. Sumin, sensing the shift in atmosphere, abandoned her pebbles and toddled back to clutch at Hisu's leg, suddenly shy. Thank you for allowing this, Junho said quietly when they reached the porch steps. He looked thinner, older, the confident corporate facade replaced by genuine humility. His mother bowed deeply to Hisu. We bring our deepest apologies and gratitude for your generosity in allowing us to see the child. Formal words, yet Hisu heard the pain beneath them. A grandmother facing the reality of separation from her only grandchild. Please come inside, Hisu gestured toward the house. Sumin usually warms up after a few minutes. They settled in the traditional front room, where sunlight streamed through paper windows onto polished wooden floors. Sumin remained wary, clinging to Hisu while stealing curious glances at the visitors. Junho's mother, Mrs. Lee, opened a small embroidered bag she carried and withdrew a jade pendant on a red silk cord. This has been in our family for 5 generations, she explained, holding it out. Given to each child on their first birthday for protection and good fortune. I would be honored if Sumin might have it, regardless of circumstances. Hisu accepted the pendant, feeling its smooth weight, family history carved in stone, transcending present conflicts. Thank you. I'll keep it for her until she's old enough to understand its significance. Gradually, Sumin's curiosity overcame her caution. When Junho carefully placed a colorful wooden toy on the floor between them, a traditional puzzle box, she ventured forward to investigate. It plays music when you solve it, he explained softly, demonstrating how the panels could slide. Sumin watched with intense concentration, then reached for the box with determined little hands. When she successfully moved one panel, revealing a carved flower beneath, her face lit with triumph. She has your intelligence, Mrs. Lee observed, tears gathering in her eyes. And your determination. And her father's focus, Hisu acknowledged quietly. It would be easier to deny any resemblance, to erase Junho's contribution entirely. But the truth was etched in Sumin's features, in the way she approached problems with single-minded concentration. They spent an hour together, the conversation careful but gradually warming as Sumin's antics broke through the tension. When it was time for them to leave, Mrs. Lee bowed again to Hisu. I failed as a mother, she said plainly. I saw what ambition was doing to my son and said nothing. I witnessed how the company consumed him and remained silent. That shame is mine to carry. Hisu, surprised by the candor, nodded in acknowledgement. We all carry responsibility for the paths we choose or fail to choose. Junho knelt to say goodbye to Sumin, maintaining a respectful distance that broke Hisu's heart despite everything. Whatever his crimes, his love for his daughter was real and raw. May I write to her? He asked Hisu as he stood. When I'm away. Letters she can read someday, when she's old enough to understand. Hisu hesitated, then nodded. Send them through my attorney. I won't hide them from her. Relief softened Junho's features momentarily. Thank you. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small flash drive. This contains everything. All the accounts, passwords, legal documents concerning your inheritance and Sumin's trust. My personal assets have been liquidated and transferred as we agreed. As Hisu accepted it, their fingers brushed briefly. Something passed between them, not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement of all they had been to each other, all they had lost. I'll always regret, Junho began. Don't, Hisu interrupted gently. Regret doesn't change the past. Just let it guide your future choices. After they left, Youngmi found Hisu sitting on the porch steps, watching Sumin play in the last rays of afternoon sunlight. She sat beside her friend in comfortable silence. Will you tell her the truth someday? Youngmi finally asked. About everything? A version of it, Hisu replied. one that honors the complexity without crushing her with it. She deserves to know her history without being defined by it. Youngmi nodded. And what about Lee Enterprises? The board meeting is next week. They're expecting an answer. Hee-soo took a deep breath, feeling the weight of legacy and expectation pressing against the newfound peace she discovered in this quiet corner of Gyeongju. I've been thinking about transformation, she said slowly. Not just recovery, but true metamorphosis. The company needs more than cosmetic changes after what happened. You have ideas, Youngmi observed, recognizing the spark that had begun to return to her friend's eyes in recent weeks. A foundation, Hee-soo confirmed, using 30% of the company's annual profits for ethical investment in women-owned businesses, educational initiatives, environmental restoration, converting the entire manufacturing division to sustainable practices within 5 years. Transparent governance with external oversight. Youngmi smiled. The board will have collective heart failure. Then they can recover just as I had to. Hee-soo replied with quiet conviction. I won't return to a company that operates the old way. Either we transform it into something that heals rather than exploits, or I sell my shares and build something new. She stood, brushing cherry blossom petals from her lap. I spent months relearning how to walk, how to speak, how to remember. The hardest part wasn't the physical recovery. It was remembering who I was beneath all the expectations and obligations. I won't forget again. Youngmi rose beside her. So you're going back to Seoul? Hee-soo watched as Sumin discovered a new treasure in the garden. A perfect spiral seashell someone had placed among the stones. Her daughter's delighted laughter carried across the yard, pure and unrestrained. Not to stay, she decided. We'll split our time. The company can adapt to a CEO who values balance. If they can't, she shrugged, a gesture of newfound freedom. Then perhaps it's not the legacy I'm meant to continue. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ancient garden, Hee-soo walked toward her daughter, who held up her seashell offering with pride. Taking Sumin's small hand in hers, she felt the perfect clarity that comes from survival. Not just of body, but of spirit. Tomorrow is soon enough for decisions, she told Youngmi as they walked back toward the house, Sumin skipping between them. Tonight, we'll count stars instead of assets. Inside the warm kitchen, as they prepared a simple dinner together, Hee-soo found herself humming her grandmother's favorite song, a folk melody about a river finding its way to the sea, not rushing, not forcing, but flowing inexorably toward its destiny, carving new paths when necessary, adapting to the landscape it encountered. Hee-soo stood at the conference room window, watching the city lights shimmer through the snowfall while behind her, board members and foundation directors gathered their materials after the final meeting of the year. The atmosphere was relaxed, celebratory. They had just approved funding for 20 new women-owned businesses and 3 major environmental restoration projects. Impressive results for Year 5, Youngmi said, joining her at the window. As the foundation's chief operating officer, she had presented most of the financial data during the meeting. We've tripled our impact metrics since the first year. Hee-soo smiled, noting how her friend had fully embraced the corporate language she had once mocked. And the company? Stock is up 17% this quarter. Youngmi handed her a tablet displaying Lee Enterprises' latest financial report. The sustainable manufacturing transition is complete, 2 years ahead of schedule. The investors who threatened to leave when you announced the changes are now writing articles about ethical capitalism. A quiet satisfaction settled in Hee-soo's chest. Not triumph, she had moved beyond needing that, but the steady warmth of purpose fulfilled. And Jaehwan's legal team. Minji's final appeal was denied last month, Youngmi confirmed. She'll serve her full sentence. Hee-soo nodded, absorbing this information without the emotional turmoil it might once have caused. 5 years had softened even those sharpest edges of her past. And Youngmi hesitated, then continued, Junho completes his sentence next spring. A more complex feeling stirred at this news, not quite forgiveness, not quite its absence. Has he continued writing to Sumin? Monthly, Jae-hwan says the letters have changed over time. Less about justifying himself, more about reflecting on consequences. He's been teaching business ethics classes to other inmates. Before Hee-soo could respond, the conference room door burst open and 6-year-old Soo-min rushed in. Her school uniform slightly rumpled and her eyes bright with excitement. "Mom, look what I made in art class." She thrust forward a carefully constructed paper lantern, painted with symbols of protection and good fortune. "Teacher Kim says we can light them at the Solstice Festival tonight. Can we go? Please." Hee-soo knelt to examine the lantern, admiring the careful brushwork. "This is beautiful, Soo-min-ah. The lines are so precise." Soo-min beamed at the praise. "I used the techniques grandmother taught me last summer. Of course we can attend the festival," Hee-soo assured her, tucking a strand of hair behind her daughter's ear. "We'll light your lantern and make a wish for the new year." Director Kong approached, bowing respectfully. "Mrs. Lee, the international partners are waiting in the reception area. Shall I tell them you'll be delayed?" The familiar tension resurfaced. Duty pulling against personal life, the eternal balance she struggled to maintain. Before she could respond, Soo-min tugged at her sleeve. "Is it the people from Singapore? The ones who want to copy our foundation model?" Surprised, Hee-soo nodded. "Yes, they're interested in establishing something similar in Southeast Asia." "Then I'll come with you," Soo-min decided with the easy confidence she'd inherited from both parents. "I can show them my school's sustainability project while you talk business. Then we can all go to the festival together." Youngmi chuckled. "She's definitely your daughter." "Indeed," Hee-soo smiled, gathering her materials. "Though sometimes I see reflections of her father as well." "Do you still have the dreams?" Youngmi asked quietly as they walked toward the reception area, Soo-min skipping ahead. Hee-soo considered the question. The nightmares had plagued her for years after the incident, vivid flashes of falling, of betrayal, of that sickening moment of realization on the balcony. Less frequently now, and they've evolved. "Sometimes in the dreams, I still fall, but I also fly." The reception area hummed with conversation as international partners mingled with foundation staff. Hee-soo paused in the doorway, observing the scene. The foundation's logo, a stylized phoenix rising, adorned the wall behind them, illuminated softly in the winter light. As she stepped forward to greet her guests, Hee-soo felt the familiar sensation of being watched. Glancing toward the street-level windows, she caught a glimpse of a familiar silhouette. A man standing in the falling snow, looking in at the warmly lit gathering. Her heart contracted with recognition. Even at this distance, even after 5 years, she knew Junho's stance, the set of his shoulders. He wasn't supposed to be out yet. Youngmi had just said spring. But perhaps there had been an early release good behavior. For a moment, their eyes met through the glass and snow. No words, no gestures, just acknowledgement across the distance. Then he bowed slightly, not the cursory business nod he'd once employed, but a deeper gesture of respect and perhaps remorse, before turning to disappear into the swirling whiteness. "Mom!" Soo-min was at her elbow, concerned. "Are you okay? You look like you saw a ghost." Hee-soo took a deep breath, centering herself in the present moment. "Not a ghost, just a memory. Come, let me introduce you to our visitors." Later that evening, beneath paper lanterns strung across an ancient temple courtyard, Hee-soo watched as Soo-min carefully lit her creation. The delicate paper structure glowed from within, casting warm patterns across her daughter's upturned face. "Make a wish before you release it," Hee-soo instructed softly. Soo-min closed her eyes tightly, her face a study in concentration. When she opened them, determination shone in her gaze, the same expression Hee-soo saw in the mirror when making difficult decisions. "I wished for truth," she announced as they prepared to release the lantern into the night sky. "Truth?" Hee-soo asked, surprised. Most children her age wished for toys or adventures. Soo-min nodded solemnly. "I found the letters in your desk. The ones from my father." A cold that had nothing to do with winter seeped into Hee-soo's bones. "You weren't supposed to." "I know." Sumin interrupted, uncharacteristically serious. But I've been dreaming about a man who watches me from a distance. He never speaks, just looks sad. It's him, isn't it? My father. The lantern glowed between them, illuminating the moment of reckoning Hisu had both prepared for and dreaded. She had always planned to tell Sumin the full story when she was older, strong enough to bear it. But perhaps children sensed more than adults realized, absorbed truth through the unspoken currents that ran beneath daily life. Yes, she admitted finally. Those are his letters to you. Why does he sound so sad in them? And why can't I meet him? The other children at school have divorced parents they visit on weekends. Sumin's questions came rapidly now, as though a dam had broken. Is he a bad person? Did he hurt you? Is that why you look afraid sometimes when you think I'm not watching? The festival continued around them. Families laughing, lanterns rising into the night sky, wishes and hopes ascending like prayers. But between mother and daughter, time seemed suspended. The moment crystallized in the lantern's gentle glow. Hisu knelt to meet her daughter's eyes directly. The truth is complicated, Sumin-ah. Your father made terrible mistakes that hurt many people, including me. He's been away because he had to face consequences for those choices. Like when I broke grandmother's vase and had to apologize and use my allowance to help replace it. A smile touched Hisu's lips despite the gravity of the conversation. Similar, but with much bigger consequences. Adults who make serious mistakes sometimes have to go away for a while to reflect and make amends. But he loves me? The question held all the vulnerability of childhood, the fundamental need to know one was wanted, valued. Very much, Hisu confirmed, her voice gentle but firm. That has never been in question. His letters show that, don't they? Sumin nodded slowly. He writes about seeing me grow up through photos you send. He says he hopes I'll be brave and kind like you, not ambitious and fearful like him. The words, Junho's words, struck Hisu with unexpected force. She had read each letter before passing them to Jae-hwan to store for Sumin's future, but hearing her daughter recite them aloud brought their meaning into sharper relief. Mom, the lantern is getting hot, Sumin warned, her practical nature reasserting itself. We should release it before it burns. Together, they lifted the lantern and let it drift upward, joining dozens of others that floated like earthbound stars against the night sky. As it rose, carried by thermal currents and winter winds, Hisu felt something release within herself as well. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps its precursor, the willingness to consider it. I saw him today, she admitted quietly. Your father, outside the foundation. Sumin's hand tightened in hers. Did you speak to him? No, but I think perhaps, someday we might. They watched their lantern ascend until it was indistinguishable from the others, a constellation of human hopes rising above the city that had witnessed both Hisu's fall and her resurrection. I have another wish, Sumin declared suddenly. You only get one per lantern, Hisu reminded her, smiling. This one doesn't need a lantern. Sumin's expression was earnest, her eyes, so like Junho's in shape, yet filled with Hisu's compassion, locked on her mother's face. I wish we could be brave together, all three of us. The simplicity of the statement, the profound challenge within it, left Hisu momentarily speechless. From the mouth of her child came the question she had been circling for 5 years. Was there a future that acknowledged the past without being imprisoned by it? Bravery takes many forms, she finally answered. Sometimes it means protecting yourself from those who have hurt you. Sometimes it means offering the possibility of redemption. I'm still learning which kind this situation requires. Sumin considered this with the seriousness she applied to mathematical problems. Grandmother says the strongest trees bend in the storm instead of breaking. Maybe bravery is like that too, bending without breaking. Snow continued to fall around them, dusting their hair and coats with delicate crystals that caught the lantern light. In the distance, temple bells began to ring, marking the hour of transition when darkness began its slow retreat and light's return became inevitable. We should join the others for the closing ceremony, Hisu said. gesturing toward the temple courtyard where the foundation team waited. Young Mi has hot chocolate. As they walked across the snow-covered ground, Sumin maintaining her thoughtful silence, Hisu felt a text message vibrate in her pocket. Later, when the festivities had ended and Sumin slept in the car during the drive back to their Gyeongju weekend home, she would read the message from an unknown number. The lantern you released with our daughter was beautiful. I watch from a distance not to disturb your peace but to remind myself of what matters most. When she is ready, when you are ready, I will be waiting. Not for forgiveness I haven't earned, but for the chance to show her a father who learned his lesson before it was too late. And later still, when midnight brought the imperceptible shift toward longer days and shorter nights, Hisu would compose a reply that acknowledged nothing, promised nothing, but left open a door that had seemed permanently sealed. The phoenix rises not because it forgets the fire, but because it remembers and rises anyway. Sumin attends the Children's Museum Science program every Saturday morning. If you wish to observe from an appropriate distance, I would not object. For now, though, she simply walked beside her daughter through the falling snow, their footprints creating a shared path toward whatever future they would craft together. A future not defined by falling, but by the strength discovered in the aftermath. Nature never follows our expectations, Hisu's grandmother had once told her. It follows its own wisdom. We're wise to pay attention. These words echoed in Hisu's mind as she knelt among the emerging peonies, gently removing weeds from their bed. 3 months had passed since the Winter Solstice Festival. 3 months since she had sent that tentative text message opening a narrow path toward possible reconciliation. The Saturday morning routine had developed its own quiet rhythm. Sumin attended her science program at the Children's Museum with innocent enthusiasm, unaware that her father observed from a careful distance, catching glimpses of her growing mind as she built robots or conducted experiments. Hisu maintained her own distance, dropping Sumin off and returning only at the session's end, avoiding direct contact with Junho but acknowledging his presence with the slight nod one might offer a respectful acquaintance. It was neither forgiveness nor rejection, merely space, room for possibility to take root and determine its own course. "Mom, look what I found." Sumin's voice broke through her reflection as the child bounded across the garden, school uniform already smudged with dirt despite the day having barely begun. In her cupped hands, she carried something with reverent care. "What treasure have you discovered?" Hisu asked, setting aside her gardening tools. Sumin opened her hands to reveal a butterfly, its wings still damp and crumpled from recent emergence. "It just came out of its chrysalis. I found it on the stone lantern by the pond." "Careful," Hisu cautioned, leaning closer to examine the delicate creature. "Its wings need time to dry and strengthen before it can fly." "I know," Sumin replied with the confidence of a child who absorbed scientific facts like sunlight. "Teacher Park says metamorphosis isn't complete until the butterfly can use its new form properly." She glanced up at her mother, eyes suddenly serious. "Like you after your accident. You needed time to become strong again too." The observation, delivered with a child's direct simplicity, struck Hisu with unexpected force. "Who told you about my accident?" "Aunt Young Mi," Sumin admitted, carefully placing the butterfly on a broad leaf where it could continue its transformation undisturbed. "I asked her why you do special exercises every morning and why sometimes your words get tangled when you're tired." A complex mix of emotions surged through Hisu. Concern that her daughter was gathering fragments of a story she wasn't ready to hear in full, relief that questions were being asked openly rather than festering in silence, and a touch of amazement at the wisdom veiled within a child's understanding. "Your aunt shouldn't have discussed that with you without asking me first," she said carefully. "She didn't tell me everything," Sumin assured her, brushing garden soil from her hands. "Just that you fell and hurt your head, and that you had to learn many things again, like walking and remembering names. She said you were the strongest person she knew because you didn't give up." Hisu pulled her daughter close, inhaling the scent of shampoo and childhood that still clung to her despite her growing independence. "Some stories are difficult to tell all at once, like putting together a puzzle when you don't have all the pieces yet." Sumin nodded against her shoulder. "Like my father's story?" "Yes," Hisu acknowledged, realizing avoidance was becoming increasingly impossible. Like your father's story. They remained embraced for a moment longer before Sumin pulled back, her expression brightening with sudden urgency. We'll be late for my robotics competition. I'm team captain today. Reality reasserted itself. School schedules, competitions, the ordinary rhythm of life that continued regardless of emotional complexities. Go change quickly. I'll prepare your breakfast to take in the car. As Sumin raced toward the house, Hisu glanced back at the butterfly still perched on its leaf, wings now beginning to extend in preparation for flight. This transformation, like all meaningful change, couldn't be rushed. 2 hours later, Hisu sat in the crowded auditorium of Seoul Science Academy, where children from across the city had gathered for the regional robotics finals. Sumin's team had advanced through preliminary rounds and now faced their final challenge, programming a rescue robot to navigate a simulated disaster zone. From her seat in the middle section, Hisu spotted him instantly, Junho, standing at the very back of the auditorium, partially concealed by a support column but with a clear view of the competition floor. He looked different from the corporate titan she had married, leaner, his expensive suits replaced by simple dark jeans and a gray sweater, his formerly perfect hair now showing strands of premature silver at the temples. Prison had changed him physically, but it was the alteration in his bearing that caught her attention, the absence of the commanding presence that had once dominated rooms. He stood with a newfound humility, watching their daughter with naked pride and longing that he made no attempt to disguise. The competition proceeded with all the drama and tension such events inspire in young participants. When Sumin's robot successfully completed its mission seconds before time expired, the team erupted in celebration, jumping and hugging with unbridled joy. Hisu found herself on her feet, applauding with unexpected fervor. In that moment of triumph, Sumin scanned the audience, first finding her mother's face. Then, with deliberate intent, turning toward the back of the room where Junho stood. Their daughter raised her trophy slightly, an acknowledgement so subtle most would miss it, but unmistakable to the parents who watched with breath suspended. Junho's response was equally restrained. A small nod, a hand briefly pressed to his heart. Then he slipped out the side exit before the ceremony concluded, maintaining the boundaries that had been established. Later, as they walked through the academy's cherry tree-lined courtyard toward the parking area, Sumin broke the contemplative silence. He comes to all my competitions, she said matter-of-factly, adjusting her backpack. Not just the museum classes. Hisu stopped walking, turning to face her daughter fully. You've seen him before today? Sumin nodded, eyes clear and direct. Since winter. He stays far away, but I can always find him in the crowd. She hesitated, then added, I haven't spoken to him. I know that wasn't our agreement. There was no agreement with you, Sumin. Hisu clarified gently. The arrangement was between your father and me. But it's about me, Sumin countered with the logic that often. Daughter at eye level, the first direct interaction Hisu had witnessed between them. What do you think you know? He asked carefully. That you did something bad. That it hurt Mom. That you went away to pay for it. Sumin's voice remained steady, though her eyes glistened with emotion. That adults sometimes make terrible mistakes that can't be fixed, only learned from. The simplicity of her understanding, stripped of legal complexities and corporate machinations, rendered all three momentarily silent. In that silence, cherry blossom petals continued to fall around them, a gentle reminder of nature's indifference to human drama, and perhaps also of its persistent offering of renewal despite destruction. Tonight, Hisu finally decided, tucking the envelope into her bag. After Sumin is asleep, we can meet at the foundation office. Junho nodded, rising slowly to his feet, but maintaining his gentle hold on Sumin's hand. Thank you, he said simply. As they stood there, not quite a family, not quite strangers, Hisu realized they had reached another threshold. Whatever the recording contained, whatever truths or manipulations Minji had delivered with her parting gift, the careful distance she had maintained was collapsing under the weight of their shared connection to the child who held their hands. Your robot was remarkable today, Junho told Sumin, his voice warming with genuine pride. The navigation algorithm was particularly impressive. Sumin's face lit with surprise and delight. You could tell what we did? Most adults don't understand the programming. I've been studying, he admitted, so I could follow your work. The simple exchange, this first tentative bridge between father and daughter, brought unexpected tears to Hisu's eyes, not from fear or pain, but from recognition of how profoundly Junho had changed and how desperately he was trying to become worthy of the second chance he hadn't asked for but clearly longed to deserve. As they walked to their separate cars, Junho to his modest sedan, Hisu and Sumin to their family SUV, the future seemed simultaneously more uncertain and more hopeful than it had hours earlier. The envelope in Hisu's bag carried the weight of the past, but the child skipping between rain puddles ahead of her embodied possibility. Whatever revelation awaited that evening, Hisu knew with sudden clarity that their story wasn't finished. It was still being written, one difficult, beautiful, honest moment at a time. Hisu arrived first, the weight of the sealed envelope heavy in her bag. She moved through the familiar space, fingers trailing across surfaces that had once defined her daily life. The framed photographs on the wall told the story of the Foundation's work. Children with new educational opportunities, community centers rebuilt, healthcare initiatives launched. Whatever else had happened, this part of their legacy remained intact, perhaps the only truly unblemished thing to emerge from the wreckage. The soft chime of the elevator announced Junho's arrival. He stepped into the office hesitantly, as though uncertain of his right to occupy the space. "Thank you for this," he said, remaining near the entrance. "I would have understood if you'd chosen to listen alone." Hisu gestured toward the conference room. "Some burdens shouldn't be carried alone. Whatever Minji recorded, we should face it together." They settled at opposite ends of the long table, the envelope placed precisely in the center between them. Neither reached for it immediately. "Where is Sumin tonight?" Junho asked, his fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the polished surface. "With my mother. I told her I had foundation business to attend to." Hisu paused, then added, "She asked if you would come to her science fair next week. Officially, not just watching from the back." Junho's eyes widened slightly. "What did you tell her?" "That I would discuss it with you." Hisu's gaze fell on the envelope. "But first, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with." With steady hands that belied her inner turmoil, she broke the seal and extracted a small digital recorder. Outdated technology that had somehow survived the years. A yellow post-it note clung to its surface with Minji's elegant handwriting. The complete board meeting, May 15th. What the court never heard. Junho's face drained of color. May 15th was the day before everything fell apart. Hisu finished, her finger hovering over the play button. "Are you ready?" He nodded once, bracing himself like a man preparing to receive a physical blow. The recording began with mundane corporate matters, financial projections, marketing strategies, approvals for various expenditures. Junho's voice sounded different then. Confident, commanding, tinged with the arrogance that accompanies unchecked success. 10 minutes in, the tenor of the meeting shifted. Now to the matter of the Songpa land acquisition. Minji's voice emerged from the recorder, smooth as polished stone. "Our competition is making a serious play for the property. They've arranged meetings with the current owners next week. We can't lose that location," Junho's recorded voice responded. "It's central to our expansion strategy. I've explored several options," Minji continued. "The most expedient would be to apply pressure through our banking connections. A sudden loan review could create financial distress for the owners, making our offer more attractive by comparison." A moment of silence followed, then Junho's voice. "That approach crosses ethical lines, Minji. Ethical lines that our competitors cross regularly," she countered smoothly. "This is how business is done at this level, Chairman Park. Surely you understand that by now. Find another way," his recorded voice instructed firmly. "One that doesn't involve manipulating financial institutions." "As you wish," Minji replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. There is the matter of the regulatory inspection coming up next month. Our foundation subsidiary has several creative accounting structures that might raise questions. At this, Hisu glanced up sharply, meeting Junho's gaze across the table. His expression remained unreadable, eyes fixed on the recorder. Those structures were your creation, Minji? Junho's recorded voice responded, an edge of irritation evident. You assured me they were within legal boundaries. Legal boundaries are often subject to interpretation, Minji's voice purred, especially when regulatory bodies are understaffed and overworked. However, I've taken the liberty of arranging a special consideration. The lead inspector has a child who would benefit greatly from our scholarship program. Are you suggesting a bribe? Junho's voice sharpened. I'm suggesting a mutually beneficial arrangement, Minji corrected. The child genuinely qualifies for our program. We simply expedite the process. The inspector feels gratitude. Our accounting innovations remain unchallenged. A long pause followed, then Junho's voice, quieter now. How many of these arrangements have you made without my knowledge, Minji? Enough to ensure our continued success, she replied. This is the ecosystem we operate in, Chairman. You set the vision. I clear the path. It's why we've achieved in 5 years what takes others decades. Another pause, longer this time, filled with the ambient sounds of papers shuffling and quiet breathing. No more, Junho finally declared. We'll succeed on genuine merit or not at all. I want a complete audit of all foundation activities, all subsidiary finances, all regulatory interactions. Everything above board from this moment forward. Minji's laugh, cold and disbelieving, sent a chill through the conference room. Such sudden moral clarity, Chairman. What inspired this ethical awakening? My daughter asked me yesterday what our company does. Junho's voice softened with evident emotion. I want to give her an answer I'm not ashamed of. Admirable, Minji responded, though her tone suggested otherwise. And naive. An audit will uncover practices that go back years. Practices that have your implicit approval, your signature on documents you clearly never read, your fingerprints all over them. You've been content to remain deliberately ignorant while enjoying the benefits. Then I'll face the consequences, he stated firmly. Better now than later. And what of the rest of us? Minji's voice hardened. Your sudden crisis of conscience endangers everyone associated with this company. The board members present today, the employees who followed directives, the partners who entered agreements in good faith. We'll handle it properly, Junho insisted, transparently, with minimal collateral damage. I see. Minji's tone shifted to something dangerous. And if I disagreed with this approach? If others on the board feel similarly? This isn't a negotiation, Junho's voice hardened. As majority shareholder and chairman, I'm instructing you to begin the audit process immediately. We'll meet tomorrow with our legal team to determine next steps. The sound of a chair scraping back. Tomorrow may bring different perspectives, Chairman Park. Sleep well. The recording continued for another minute with mundane closing remarks before clicking off. In its wake, silence descended on the conference room, heavy with implications. Hisu stared at the small device, her mind racing to connect this new information with what had unfolded afterward. Junho's arrest the following day, Minji's devastating testimony against him, the carefully constructed narrative that had portrayed Junho as the mastermind and Minji as the reluctant executor of his corrupt vision. She set you up, Hisu finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. When you threatened to expose everything, she moved first and made sure you would take the fall. Junho's hands were clasped tightly before him, knuckles white with tension. I wasn't innocent, he said quietly. Everything she said was true. I allowed it to happen. I chose not to look too closely. I accepted the results without questioning the methods. My hands aren't clean. But you were trying to change course? Hisu pressed, a strange feeling rising within her. Not quite vindication, not quite relief, but something adjacent to both. You were trying to make things right. Too late, he responded, his voice hollow. Far too late. By then, the corruption had spread too deep. Minji had built an entire shadow operation beneath the legitimate business. He met Hisu's gaze directly. I should have told you everything from the beginning. My pride, my shame. I couldn't bear for you to know how weak I'd been, how compromised. Hisu tried to process this revelation, to reconcile it with the years of anger and betrayal she had nursed. Why didn't your lawyers use this recording at trial? It disappeared, Junho explained, spreading his hands helplessly. Minji claimed no such recording existed. By then, she had systematically destroyed most evidence that contradicted her version of events. I had no proof. Until now, Hisu murmured, eyeing the recorder. Why would she give this to me after all this time? Why now? Junho's expression darkened. She's dying. This isn't about redemption. It's her final move. She wants to ensure that even in death, she maintains control over the narrative. Over us. The realization settled between them. Minji's gift wasn't motivated by conscience, but by a desire to remain the puppet master even from beyond the grave. Does it change anything? Junho asked quietly, vulnerability evident in his voice. Knowing I wasn't the architect but merely a willing participant who woke up too late? Hisu considered the question carefully, turning it over in her mind like a complex equation seeking balance. It changes some things.